Everybody always asks, what is community property? And the reality of community property is when you get married, you create a community with your spouse. So everything you do for the whole marriage is community. Anything you earn, any debt that you acquire, any property that you get, all of that is part of your community. When you divorce, that community is divided. And so they'll take what you've earned during that marriage and separate it in a way that is equal or equitable if appropriate under the circumstances. Separate property in Nevada is anything that you acquired before marriage, or sometimes things that you acquired during marriage. For example, an inheritance. Community property and separate property cannot be mixed together to protect the separate nature of the property. You want to make sure if you have separate property, you keep it separate, and you don't put it into a joint account or invest it into the house that you purchased during marriage. Because at that point, you've given a gift to the community and it can transmute or become community property. Large assets, including houses, boats, cars, the big things, are divided based on the value. So the equity or the debt that's associated with those things. When people get divorced, oftentimes the largest asset they have is their home. It has equity because it grows over time. That asset is usually divided where each party gets 50% of the value of the marital residence. So each person gets half of the equity that's in that community house. Many people have retirement accounts or pensions, and they ask all the time, how is that divided? Why does my spouse get any of my retirement? A spouse is entitled to the contributions during the time that you were married. So the change in value during marriage. Just so you can see what I'm talking about with time. If you worked for 20 years and you were married for 10 years and you retired, your spouse would be entitled to roughly half of your retirement. In theory, in Nevada, debt, whether it's credit card or associated with items, for example, debt on a vehicle, debt on a house, debt on a boat, or an ATV, that debt would be divided equally. A lot of times when parties agree or when courts look at the distribution of debt of assets and their debt that accompanies them, the item will take the debt with it. So if you get a car in a divorce and that car has an encumbrance or a loan on it, the court will give you that loan and make that loan your responsibility because you're getting the benefit of the asset. Separating a business during divorce has unique challenges because we have to value the business. We have to determine what the potential income is. We have to decide what is the most appropriate way to divide this business. Under the law, each party for a business that was started during the marriage is entitled to half of the value of the business. Sometimes couples will continue running a business together because they're divorcing on terms that will allow them to do that. Other times, that won't work out. When you can't continue in business together, we value the business and divide that value between the parties. When you receive an inheritance while you're married, that inheritance is separate property unless you mix it with community property. So if your parent passes away while you're married and you keep the inheritance in a separate account, that money would be your money. It would be your separate property. But if you put it into the community account, then there can be arguments made that that inheritance was a gift to the community, meaning that then your spouse would be entitled to half. When getting married, sometimes people will think about what happens to my property if I get divorced. When you're thinking about that, You can get a prenup. A prenuptial agreement is a document where you contract and you say, this is how we want to treat our property that we have coming into the marriage. You can also contract for how the property that you acquire during marriage will be classified or how it will be held and what happens to it upon divorce. There are postnups. Postnuptial agreements are prenuptial agreements that happened after marriage. Just note, if you're thinking about a postnuptial agreement or you're not married yet and you think that's the same thing, it's not. A prenuptial agreement, from my experience, is much more likely to be enforced. During divorce, it's not uncommon to be concerned about hidden assets or money. When the court has that issue come up, they're not looking favorably on the person who's hiding assets from that community, from their spouse. If the assets are found during the process of the divorce, before that divorce is final, then the court will likely just award it as if it wasn't hidden. However, if the asset is hidden and then you end up divorced and find out about it later, the court can, and sometimes does, give 100% to the spouse that was not engaged in the misconduct.